Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 9, Brahma's Prayers for Creative Energy, text 17. Do you all have the phone? Sure. Sorry, right. So it's third Canto, Chapter 9, text 17. Loko vikarma nirata kushale pramata. Loko vikarma nirata kushale pramata. Loko vikarma nirata kushale pramata. Karma nirata kushale pramata. Karman yayam tvadudite bavad archanesve. Karman yayam Karmanya yam tvarudite bhavadarchanesve. Yastavadasya balavan hyachivitasam. Yastavadasya balavan hyachivitasam. Sadyaschinatya nimishaya namostu tasmai. Sadyaschinatya nimishaya namostu tasmai. Loko vikarma nirata kushale pramata. Karmanya yam tvadudite bhavadarchanesve. Yastavadasya balavani yachivitasam. Sadyaschinatya nimishaya namostu tasmai. Loko vikarma nirata kushale pramata. Karmanya yam tvarudite bhavad archanesve. Yastavadasya balavan hyachivitasam. Sadyaschinatya nimishaya namostu tasmai. Loko vikarma nirata kushale pramata. Karmanya yam tvarudite bhavadarchanesve. Yastavadasya balavani yachivitasam. Sadyaschinatya nimishaya namostu tasmai. Loko vikarma nirata kushale pramata. Karmanya yam tvarudite bhavadarchanesve. Yastavadasya balavani yachivitasam. Sadyaschinatya nimishaya namastu tasmai. Word to word. Lokaha. People in general. Vikarma. Work without sense. Nirataha. Engaged in. Kushale. In beneficial activity. Pramataha. Negligent. Karmani. In activity. Ayam. This. Tvat. By you. Udite. Enunciated. Bhavat. Of you. Archane. In worship. Sve. Their own. Yaha. Who. Tavat. As long as. Asya. Of the people in general. Balavan. Very strong. Iha. This. Jivita asham. Struggle for existence. Sadyaha. Directly. Chinati. Is cut to pieces. Animishaya. By the eternal time. Namaha. My obeisances. Astu. Let there be. Tasmai. Unto him. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace of Vaidyananda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. People in general all engage in foolish acts, not in the really beneficial activities enunciated directly by you for their guidance. As long as their tendency for foolish work remains powerful, all their plans in the struggle for existence will be cut to pieces. I therefore offer my obeisances unto Him who acts as eternal time. Purport. People in general are all engaged in senseless work. They are systematically unmindful of the real beneficial work, which is the devotional service of the Lord, technically called the Archana regulations. The Archana regulations are directly instructed by the Lord in the Narada Pancharatra and are strictly followed by the intelligent men, who know well that the highest perfection and goal of life is to reach Lord Vishnu, who is the root of the tree called the cosmic manifestation. Also, in the Bhagavatam and in Bhagavad Gita, such regulative activities are clearly mentioned. Foolish people do not know that their self-interest is in realization of Vishnu. The Bhagavad 7.5, 30 to 32 says. So, Prabhupada is quoting here 3 beautiful prayers of Prahlad Maharaj, which, as we know in the famous pastime, which are some of these prayers by which he is pacifying Lord Nrsingadev, whom no one else, even Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, or even Lord Mother Lakshmi herself couldn't pacify at that time. So, I'll recite those 3 verses from Prahlad Maharaj, 7.30 to 32. Matiyana Krishna pratasvado vamito bipadyete griha vratanam varante gobhya vishatam tamisram puna punascharvita charvananam nate vidusvarta katim hi vishnum durashayaye pahyarartamanina andayatande upaniyamanas teapi shatantriyam urudam nibadha nashamatistavadurukramangrim sprishartinartapakamoyadartaha mahiyasam padarachobhishekam nishkinjananam navrinita yavat. Persons who are determined to totally rot in false material happiness cannot become Krishna-minded either by instructions from teachers, by self-realization or by parliamentary discussions. They are dragged by the unbridled senses into the darkest region of ignorance, and thus they madly engage in what is called chewing the chewed. Because of their foolish activities, they are unaware that the ultimate goal of human life is to achieve Vishnu, the Lord of the cosmic manifestation, and so their struggle for existence is in the wrong direction of material civilization, which is under the external energy. They are led by similar foolish persons, just as one blind man is led by another blind man, and both fall in the ditch. Such foolish men cannot be attracted towards the activities of the Supreme Powerful, who is actually the neutralizing measure for their foolish activities, and unless and until they have the good sense to be guided by the great souls who are completely freed from material attachment. In Bhagavad Gita, so that's the end of the translation for those verses. So So I didn't say quote. So now Prabhupada is continuing. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord asks everyone to give up all other occupational duties and absolutely engage in archana activities or in pleasing the Lord. But almost no one is attracted to such archana activity. Everyone is more or less attracted by activities which are conditions of rebellion against the Supreme Lord. The systems of jnana and yoga are also indirectly rebellious acts against the Lord. There is no auspicious activity except archana of the Lord. Jnana and yoga are sometimes accepted within the purview of archana when the ultimate aim is Vishnu, and not otherwise. The conclusion is that only the devotees of the Lord are bona fide human beings eligible for salvation. Others are vainly struggling for existence without any actual benefit. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Malapishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadikamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sakanaragunatan Vitam Tam Sachivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahakana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshvari Vrishabhana Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpaturubhascha Kripa Sindhyava Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, thank you for coming this morning to Srimad Bhagavatam class. Nice to see some devotees after a long time, active in the morning program. So we are continuing the prayers that Lord Brahma is offering to the Supreme Lord, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, at the dawn of creation, after Lord Brahma had pleased the Lord by his 100 years of penance under his instruction and got his darshan, not only his darshan, but the Lord even revealed to him the spiritual world, including Golok Vrindavan, the topmost planet. And so upon seeing all of that, now Lord Brahma is speaking not just theory, but he has, as we saw in the past time, directly realized the highest realization, the Lord and his associates in enjoying in Golok Vrindavan. And so he's fully aware of what's the purpose of the whole world, the whole existence, and what's his purpose now, because he didn't originally, when he was born out of the lotus stem growing from the navel of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, he didn't know even whom he is born from, where does this lotus come from, what is he supposed to do, and what's the whole world here all around about. So, but now by the Lord's mercy, he is fully aware of what's his duty, namely that of secondary creation. And so, in course of that, now before starting, he's offering beautiful prayers to the Lord, in which the last, as we heard, were a series of verses. He expressed the compassion he felt for all those conditioned souls for whom he has to create, for whom are going to be thrown again into this world of ignorance and into different material bodies and different planetary systems. And so he expressed beautifully his compassion for them, and now in the last several verses he's offering obeisances to the Lord in glorifying the Lord in his different aspects. He started with the Lord's impersonal feature that, as we know, Brahmano hi pratishtaham, that the Lord is the origin of Brahmajyoti, of his effulgence, which is the basis of the whole material world, and even whole spiritual world is illuminated by the Lord's effulgence, as we know. So, the Lord in his Bhagavan feature is the origin of everything, is the Summum Bonum, the Lord Sri Krishna in his Bhagavan feature. And so Lord Brahma was pointing out different aspects of the, like in, yesterday was text 16, there he pointed out that he, oh Lord, you are the root of the tree of the planetary systems, and that he explained that he himself, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, they along with Lord Vishnu are those three topmost deities in the world, but that of course Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, that they are also still subordinate to Lord Vishnu, and therefore he was offering his obeisances. And so in today, text 17, he's again actually an expression of compassion as well, and namely, particularly, he's offering obeisances to the Lord here as eternal time, and he in the verse is explaining of like how people are completely fooled by time, by Maya, because they don't realize the power of time, and they, influenced by the Lord's illusory potency, think they can. This world is a place meant for their happiness, and they can do that irrespective of any superior power, such as time, which is so powerful that we know no matter how powerful someone may be, the greatest demons, ultimately they still have to face either. Sometimes you see that the Lord comes personally in special cases, or otherwise as time, which ultimately brings death, obviously, like Krishna says he is. For those who are not ready to see him personally, then they see him at the end in the form of death. And so Brahma is lamenting of how the people engage in foolish acts. So I quickly read the translation again. Lord Brahma is saying, people in general all engage in foolish acts, not in the really beneficial activities enunciated directly by you for their guidance. As long as the tendency for foolish work remains powerful, all their plans in the struggle for existence will be cut to pieces, and therefore offer more obeisances unto him who acts as eternal time. So, and in terms of time, like Prabhupada is starting the purport that, I'll read the first two sentences again, they're like really powerful also, how, because we might not realize because we see so much glare of Maya, as Prabhupada says. It seems there's so much advancement nowadays with so much technology and so much comfort on some level. Like we have all nice residences with AC, and so you don't have to worry about being harassed by heat or cold, and you have nice water supply and everything, just turning on the tap. So life is so comfortable in many ways compared us to some centuries ago, for example. But that's the glare of Maya. It's foolish to think that we are happily situated. And so Prabhupada is writing here in the beginning of the purport that people in general are all engaged in senseless work. They are systematically unmindful of the real beneficial work, which is the devotional service of the Lord, technically called the Arjuna regulations. So, Prabhupada is pointing out here, unfortunately, due to the influence of Kali Yuga, we see that it's not just some people who are less intelligent and who are not aware of the ultimate goal that, as Prabhupada is quoting then Prahlad Maharaj, which is Svartikatim hi Vishnu, and to attain the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Vishnu or Krishna. But it's completely prevalent, as Prabhupada is saying here, to systematically unmindful of the real beneficial work. So, that's why, altogether the material world is made for conditioned souls who are generally unmindful of the real goal. That's why they come here in the first place. But even more so now in Kali Yuga, obviously. But we see that that's at the dawn of creation Lord Brahma prayed, and that's why we saw many verses where he expressed his feeling bad for all those who are unmindful of the real goal, of the real self-interest. And in terms of time, there's one beautiful prayer also that I like to meditate on in terms of because it not only shows the power of time, but it also, in this prayer, it crushes our false ego as well, because we might, even as devotees, we might still be attached to material things and be even proud of some material achievements or possessions or anything. And there's one prayer that Muchukunda, who was a great king, so much so that the demigods had engaged him many times to help them in fighting the demons, and we know then he got the boon asked for the boon to just being able to sleep until he could, until Lord Krishna would appear, so that he could get his darshan. And as we know, Krishna arranged the pastime in a way that he apparently ran away from the battle and into the cave where Muchukunda was sleeping, and then Muchukunda by his glance burned the demon Kalayavana and got the darshan of Krishna. And in those prayers that he's offering, one of them is where he's talking about the Krishna's power as time also. So he's praying Puradatir hima parishkrita ishcharan matam gachirva naradeva samyata sa eva kalena duratyayena te kalevarovit krimi basma samyata. So, and obviously, again, Muchukunda, he was a great king, obviously, so said so much so that even the demigods asked him for help. So, when he's saying that, and directly seeing the Lord, it's not some theory, but it's directly realization of a pure devotee there. So he's explaining Puraratya Hima Parishkritarishcharan. Those who formerly might ride on golden chariots adorned with golden chariots, or on fierce elephants, Matam Gajera, and Naradeva Samnita. And we know in Sanskrit one word for king is Naradeva, because they are supposed to directly represent the Supreme Personality of Godhead by taking care of the citizens and guiding them in their elevation in their material and spiritual life. And so he's saying that that someone may call himself king and be carried on golden chariots or on fierce elephants, but what happens to them? Saeva kalina duratya yenate, that same person then later, by your invincible power of time, by the influence of your invincible power of time, what are these persons, or rather like what they identified with wrongly, which is because we are all spirit souls, eternal souls of Krishna, so the designation as being a particular king, for example, is so simply related to the body. And so he's saying that same body whom you identified with, what is it by your power of time called later? Kalevaro vit krimi basma samyita. Later it is known as vit means stool, basma means ashes, or krimi means worms. Why? Because, so we know, bodies in some cultures, they are burnt, then it becomes ashes, which is in Vedic culture, or in other cultures they are buried and then they are eaten by worms or by other animals, which convert the material of the body into stool. So imagine, no matter how beautiful, how powerful a person may be, all that he identifies with, first of all, with the body itself and everything related to the body, which might even be a kingdom and all relatives and friends and other material possessions, it all, at one stroke, it's gone by the power of time, which at the end comes as death. So, and the power of time, like one common, quite obvious exhibition I can experience many times myself, especially because when I was even before I came here, when I was back home in Austria, and I just spent some time abroad as away, and you come back, and because when we see the people whom we are always around with, and that's like one amazing thing about time, that it acts unstoppably, continually, gradually, onto everything material, obviously, not on the soul, but in the material world, all matter is constantly being degraded by time and then again manifest in another form. And so, but we don't, the amazing thing is it goes in such a speed, in such a way that we can't directly see it. So only when you, after some period of time, you can actually see the effect of time, like Prabhupada explains. It's you can't see directly the process, how it is happening, but you can see the effect. So, and like for example with relatives or friends, when we are always around with them, we actually don't really are aware or don't realize how everyone is aging, how the bodies are changing of everyone, or with children, for example, even when they are growing up. But then as soon as we are away for some time and come back, then we see immediately, oh wow, like everyone changed so much, especially like I have a small brother, half brother, who when he was born, I was already a teenager, so I used to drive him around in the trolley and everything. So then it strikes you actually when you then see how the bodies are changing so dramatically. But again, otherwise you don't see it. And people in general, even though then they might see such effects, well, still they don't. Unfortunately, most people are not intelligent enough to then, because that should make us inquire. Okay, so this material life, these bodies are changing so much, and there is nothing which can stop that. So what's life then really about? Then it just finishes and that's it, and like what we are supposed to do. But yeah, by the influence of Maya, people in general still don't think of that, and that's why Prabhupada is quoting here Prahlad Maharaj, that people in general, yes, they're not aware of that, and there's no hope of them unless then in the third verse of those three he's quoting about how they are not, because even though they see all of that in power of time, they're not able to catch it with their own intelligence, and they're not able to take up to devotional service, to turn their attention to the lotus feet of Krishna, as Prahlad Maharaj is saying in the last verse, Najamatis tavadurukramangrim, that matis, their attention, it cannot be turned to the Lord, because people are generally dushkriti. They don't, like especially now in Kali Yuga, it's just prevalent, full of sinful activities, not even of pious activities. So most people, they're not even properly aware that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead. And yeah, we just engage in all sorts of sinful activities. So they are not, and that's why the intelligent is not able to turn to the lotus feet of Krishna, unless, Prahlad Maharaj is explaining here, unless the Mahiyasam Padarajo Abhishekam, unless they get the Abhishek of the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. But very interestingly, here Prabhupada, in how he translated the verse here, is not as taking the dust of the lotus feet of the great devotees, but he directly gave the purport of it, so to say, what it really means. Because what does it mean? It does not mean that, okay, every time you come to temple, first thing or only thing you do is outside at the shoe rack, taking all the shoes and collecting the dust and putting on your head. That's not and in that way you can turn your attention to Sri Radha Gopinath. No, that's not what it means. Of course, it means even taking the dust of someone's feet. Obviously, it signifies humility, that you accept them as being superior to you. So yes, that's correct. But then more further, Prabhupada is explaining here, he translated it as, let's see again. Such foolish men cannot be attracted towards the activities of the Supreme Powerful, who is actually the neutralizing measure for the foolish activities, unless and until they have the good sense to be guided by the great souls who are completely freed from material attachment. So, in other words, to be guided by the great souls means ultimately to surrender to a spiritual master, to accept the instructions of Krishna's pure devotees. And that's, yeah, as we know, it's like so foundational. That's the only way how we can really get spiritual knowledge and how we can really realize it ourselves and really make advancement in spiritual life. And like I've been reading now, recently started Bhagavad Gita. So there, for example, in the second chapter, some famous verses, it's explained also. Or first let me starts with, like Srila Prabhupada himself, many times he said that actually although we know he was Shaktivesha Avatar, he was specifically sent by the Lord for the purpose what he did of giving Krishna consciousness to the whole world, but still in his humility obviously he always considered himself fallen and also fully dependent on the mercy of his spiritual master. So he was saying when he was young, when he read Bhagavad Gita and the commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to one particular verse in Bhagavad Gita, which is Vyavyasa yatmika bodhiyarekaha kuranandaha pahushaka yanantascha buddhayo vyavyasayanam. Where this Vyavasa yatmika bodhiya, this full resolute determination for executing Krishna consciousness, where the buddhi, the intelligence, is fixed in accepting Krishna's order, and which particularly means in accepting the spiritual master's order, which Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is explaining there. So, here for example, in relatively recently I read in 4th canto also where the Prachetas. So sorry, just to finish that. So Srila Prabhupada was saying that, when he read that, where Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying there that it means to be fixed in such intelligence means to accept the spiritual master's instructions as one's life and soul. And so when Prabhupada read that, then he was completely convinced from his side that yes, there is nothing else as important for him as accepting and carrying out the spiritual master's order, which in his case was to preach to all the English-speaking people as well, not just in India, and to print books and publish books, as we know. So, for example, Prabhupada explains that beautifully there in the 4th canto, 24th chapter to text 15, which is when the Prachetas, when we know they went off for tapasya originally under the order of their father Daksha, to simply, what did he want? He didn't want them to become pure devotees. He wanted them to undergo penances for the sake of getting the Lord's mercy to be able to beget good progeny, become good kings, rulers of the world, and following in Daksha's footsteps. But they were actually very sincere and very innocent. They had actually no material desires. And Lord Shiva, a pure devotee of the Lord, knew that, and so he came on the way and he instructed them in the famous Rudra Gita, and which prayers then they continuously recited, meditated upon in submerging themselves underwater and for 10,000 years until they ultimately got the darshan of the Lord. And so, but when it's explained there, then Lord Shiva met them. I'll just read a short part of the translation in this text, in 4:24:15, where when they met Lord Shiva, who out of great mercy instructed them about the absolute truth, and they meditated upon the instructions, chanting and worshipping them with great care and attention. So again, here we see how worshipping one's spiritual master, in their case Lord Shiva, doesn't mean only, like Prabhupada is in today's Prabhupada is saying about the Arjuna regulations, which literally means worshipping the deity, worshipping the Lord in his personal form, and which we generally conceive of as performing arti, offering bhoga and all of that. But it doesn't mean just that. Like we see here, that specifically it means worshipping the spiritual master means worshipping his instructions, carrying out his instructions. So it's said here that they meditated upon the instructions, chanting and worshipping them with great care and attention. And so Prabhupada is explaining in the purport there about what's the proper mood of a disciple in regard to the spiritual master's instructions. So, for which he is quoting Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur from Bhagavad Gita, which we discussed here. So Prabhupada is saying, the disciple should unhesitatingly think about the instruction or orders of the spiritual master and should not allow himself to be disturbed by anything else. So that's one important point, that because we might think, okay, have the faith that yes, I know for my real benefit I should simply do whatever my spiritual master tells me, my spiritual authorities, but then we might not have the strength and determination to actually, arrange our life in such a way that we can really do it. And what Prabhupada is explaining here, if you're really serious about spiritual life, then it is our duty to arrange it in such a way. Because he's saying here that you should not only unhesitatingly think about the instructions of orders of the spiritual master, but you should not allow yourself to be disturbed by anything else. So, yeah. And of course, it's not always easy, but at least we should be aware of, yes, we need to aspire to really arrange our life in such a way that we can focus on carrying out the instructions of our spiritual master, which basically is, usually it's not like they give us some greatly difficult instructions as I'll try to come to that a little bit of Prabhupada's pastimes, like Baba Bhushanpur yesterday said a few of also pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. So for us it's easy, to chant 16 rounds, to follow the 4 regulative principles, and engage as much as you can in hearing and chanting and in practical devotional service, and somehow contributing to Srila Prabhupada's movement. Ideally, of course, for preaching, book distribution, we know that's the most dear. But so, continuing here, Prabhupada is quoting Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that the order of the spiritual master is the life substance of the disciple. So, yeah, and that's a very powerful statement also, because life substance means your very life fully depends on that. Like there's nothing, otherwise you cannot live. Like that's how desperately we should feel of depending on the spiritual master's mercy and depending on carrying out his order. That if I'm not able to do that, I'm dead. There's no meaning to my life. So that's and that's obviously, we know, like Srila Prabhupada, that's how he actually felt and carried it out, no matter what great impediments were there. Srila Prabhupada went on and ultimately was so amazingly successful. So Prabhupada further says here that one shouldn't consider whether he's... So now, even like we know, generally we always say the goal is to go back to Godhead, but Prabhupada is saying here that one shouldn't consider whether he's going back to Godhead or not. His first business should be to execute the order of the spiritual master. Because that again, that shows the full faith into the spiritual master, that whether I'm fit to be taken back to Godhead or not, or whether it's the desire of the Lord to even take me back, or whether even if I'm fully perfect, if He wants me to continue service here, that's not up to me, that's up to the Lord and up to the spiritual master. My only business is to execute the order of the spiritual master. And Prabhupada further says that the disciple should always meditate on the order of the spiritual master, and that is perfectional meditation. And he should also find out the means by which he can perfectly worship and execute it. And that's also significant here that he's saying, and that is perfectional meditation, because the Bhagavad Gita verse that he's quoting here, there's a similar verse, just I think 3 or 4 verses after that, where Krishna explains then a bit further about how it is that that those who are not resolute in Krishna consciousness, that they cannot focus their mind. So that verse is Bhogashvara prasaktanam taya paritachetasam yavyasayatmika buddhir samauto navidiyate. So there in the last line he's saying that samadhi, which is real perfectional meditation, as Prabhupada is saying here, does not take place with those who don't have this resolute determination. And why? Because their intelligence, as he said in the other verse, it's many branched. So, but how is it many branched? Due to Bhogaishvara prasaktanam tayaparita chetasam. So their chetasa, the consciousness, is stolen away by Bhoga and Aishvarya, by trying to enjoy Bhoga right now, and Aishvarya wins opulence. So what is opulence for? We want opulence to be able to enjoy in the future as well, to have this false security of, yes, I have this and this possession, so I can nicely enjoy my material life. And yeah, so that's about here. Then, in terms of, let's maybe now quickly go to what I mentioned about. So this full surrender to the spiritual master's instructions, that is, because one might think, well, This means I'm giving up my individuality, I'm giving up my free will. And yes, in terms of we are giving up our, misusing our free will, and we surrender to how it's meant to be used, the free will, namely to serve Krishna. But this is what obviously we know, like we heard that recently also by Ganesh Prabhu and Vibhushan Prabhu about the levels of pleasure, which the lowest is that of Chadananda, of trying to enjoy matter, sense gratification. Then comes Brahmananda, that of realizing the impersonal feature of the Lord. And higher than that is then obviously is Premananda, of that of pure devotion service. And even higher than that is Sevananda, of completely selflessly, simply fulfilling the Lord, even if you're not able to see the Lord, if you stay in hell or anything. So this surrender to the Lord, to the spiritual master's instructions, that is what brings such inconceivable potency. As Bhavi Bhushan yesterday was saying, this one famous pastime, for example, of Madhu Dvisha Maharaj, who back then in Melbourne, he told the story of how they had so many fines given to them because at that time the council didn't allow them to actually do any Harinam or book distribution, and still they kept doing and never paying the fines, and so they were piled up big stack at the council. And then came the time when they wanted to do Ratha Yatra, for which they needed permission. And Prabhu was explaining amazingly how, like, again, maturely it didn't make any sense that there would be any possibility for them to be able to get this permission, because the council was very frustrated with them of not following the rules, and on the other hand rather stacking up a pile of fines that they would never pay. And still Madhu Dvisha Maharaj was fully surrendered to Srila Prabhupada's instructions, to Srila Prabhupada's will, and so in full faith, even though at first he had no idea like what actually he should say, what reason there could be for them to accept. But then intensely praying to the Lord, praying to Srila Prabhupada, he got the intelligence by the Lord, and the Lord guided the super soul in the hearts of those people there, that they did accept, by saying, I think he said, just everyone should get a fair go, or something like that. It's a simple statement. And similarly we see, you perhaps would have heard the famous pastime in Prabhupada's time also, which is maybe one of or their most on a larger scale, not just like where you see not just on one individual devotee having some inconceivable achievement, but where like so many devotees were involved. Like it was at a large scale, inconceivable potency that Prabhupada bestowed upon his disciples that time. So that was the publication of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. You might have heard of how up to that time, a particular time, and they were at that time at BBT able to publish one volume, one book in 4 months, every 4 months. And that, but Prabhupada, even though we know he did so much preaching and other activities managing the whole worldwide organization of ISKCON, still he was proficiently translating and writing his purports at that time to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita basically at night time. And so they were far behind actually. He had actually at that point then even finished the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, and they had barely they hadn't even started Chaitanya Charitamrita. They were still in what he had done before, like 4th canto in Bhagavatam or something like that. And so he was frustrated, explained it to them, or expressed it to them, and then they were anxiously planning and how can we increase? And they really got up their best resources and thinking of how they could speeden it up, and they came up with the plan. Rather than one book in 4 months, they would be able to publish one book every month. And so they were very happy to be able to present this plan to Srila Prabhupada. But what did he say? He said, no, that's too slow. I want all 17 volumes in 2 months. And obviously the devotees, even that plan was already for them like really the topmost they could think of. Like imagine, before they were also not just sleeping and eating and chanting, and they were doing one volume in 4 months. So then, obviously that it was from material perspective, it was absolutely impossible, the request of Srila Prabhupada, or not just request, I mean Prabhupada, like we know Prabhupada was most merciful, is most merciful, most compassionate, the most softest heart you can think of, but at the same time, which I think we might not so many times think of, that he also was sometimes incredibly demanding to his disciples, because he knew the capacity and he knew how, obviously as a pure devotee, how in the fastest way to fully purify and their spiritual advancement and get the best out for his disciples and for the service for the whole world. So in this case, he did that to give. He demanded, I want 17 volumes in 2 months. And so obviously everyone was in complete shock and took them a little bit to come over the shock, but then Srila Prabhupada's mercy, letting this inconceivable potency descend upon his disciples, they managed to do it. And so, again, that shows this inconceivable potency coming from parampara by the mercy of the spiritual master through his instructions and through the disciples' surrender to those instructions. And we're kind of running out of time. Yesterday was also the appearance day of Madhvacharya, whom we know is one of the main acharyas for us. So he was incarnation of Vayu. He was doing many inconceivable things also. We won't go into that. One few more things I wanted to mention is, for example, Priyavrata Maharaj, when we discussed that recently also, how he was ordered, or even though he was fully fixed in full devotional service as a Naistika brahmachari under the instructions of Narad Muni, that his father tried to get him back because he needed him to rule the world. After the Prachetas, their son Daksha, after he also went off to perform penances, then from that line no one was left, so then the other son of Swayambhu Manu was Priyavrata Maharaj. So then they needed him, and so even Lord Brahma came down to convince him, and in beautiful prayers that we discussed how he pacified him also. And in one purport there it's nicely explained how, because it's quite astounding, this pastime actually, that you see there was someone, a pure devotee, fully engaged in full devotional service, and even under the instruction of another famous pure devotee of Narad Muni. But then comes another pure devotee, Lord Brahma, who is telling him, apparently something completely opposite. He's telling him, no, stop this, become the ruler of the world, which means take so much material power, material possessions, you marry a wife, beget children, all of that, which seems like a big distraction to devotional service. But obviously someone like Priyavrata Maharaj, he still is always absorbed in the Lord, and nothing can stop his devotional service. But from an external point of view, it seems so. But Srila Prabhupada explains there that neither was Narad Muni, who had instructed Priyavrata Maharaj to simply engage in full devotional service, there as he renounced, in the renounced order, and then comes along Lord Brahma and tells him to do something opposite. But neither was Narad Muni resentful against Lord Brahma, telling him, taking away his disciple to do something else, nor Priyavrata Maharaj himself. Prabhupada is explaining here that although Lord Brahma had forced Priyavrata Maharaj to accept management of worldly affairs, and thus breaking his vow to remain brahmachari and completely engage in devotional service, Narad Muni and Priyavrata Maharaj did not look upon Lord Brahma with resentment. So in case of Narad Muni, he was not at all sorry that he had been frustrated in making Priyavrata Maharaj his disciple. So again, this shows the full surrender of the pure devotees to the Lord's will, to the spiritual master's instructions, and not to being attached to, the instructions might change. Like in that case, you see, he was surrendered to Narad Muni following his instructions, and then someone else comes under the Lord, by the Lord's will, who tells him something completely opposite. And still surrender doesn't mean that to be attached to I got this instruction first, so why are you telling me something else? No, I'm sticking to this. No, it means, surrendered means, okay, at any time, then you can get a completely opposite instruction, and still you don't get upset, you just fully happily accept it and carry it out. So Yeah, I'll just finish with one more point in terms of how we see discussed here in Lord Brahma's verse today of how those foolish people engage in those activities which are not at all beneficial to them or to anyone else, and thus spoil their life, not following their real self-interest, being that of satisfying the Supreme Lord Vishnu or Krishna. So Prabhupada read it recently now also in Bhagavad Gita, and this famous verse 2.7 of Karpanya Tushopaha Tasvabhava, which is the point where Arjuna is surrendering to Lord Krishna's instructions. There Prabhupada in a very powerful point, Prabhupada is explaining this about first of all about how everyone without the spiritual master's instructions and mercy, how everyone is thrown into this material world of being bewildered by the world's complexities. So Prabhupada is explaining here in the purport that by nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. So again, that's how this world is made, because we, in the first place, decide to be separate from the Lord, decide to be able to forget the Lord, and so material nature that's how it's made, that by nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. In every step there is perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. All Vedic literatures advise us to approach a bona fide spiritual master to get free from the perplexities of life which happen without our desire. They are like a forest fire that somehow blazes without being set by anyone. And so he's continuing here about, for like a forest fire, about the example that no one sets it and still it happens in the same way. No one wants material miseries, but they come. And like Narad Muni in a famous verse to Vyasadeva at the beginning of Bhagavatam, he explains that also